Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Worcester Council Theater 3000. Another week without a city council meeting, but this is the only place in town that you can see a city councilor tonight. If you don't go to Joey's. That's right. Coming up in just a few minutes, we have a very special guest, Etel Haxhiaj. We're very excited to have her here. One of our favorite people on the entire planet. And we're going to talk about some important stuff. So before we get into that, how are you guys? How is everybody doing? I missed you guys last week.
Yeah, welcome back.
Yeah, I miss you too, Brad.
Yeah, I always had I'd have to do my little sojourns to New Orleans and
spread the gospel of me.
Have I ever shared my Joey's photo with you guys?
No.
Oh, God. Oh, you guys keep talking. I'm going to find this, and it's going to give you something to laugh at for the next 15, 20 hours.
Years.
I love
Brian,
they're my favorite.
You're not the only person who's taken a sojourn. I myself have taken a sojourn to the Tall Pines to join my fellow brothers in the Bohemian Grove. And I am coming back to you guys with a little surprise in store. I have, after Etel, we're going to have a 13-year-old girl who claims to be possessed by the demon Abraxas. And we're going to do a seance live on camera and see what the devil Abraxas has to say to the folks at home. I don't see what could go wrong.
This is really exciting.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
Don't remember that in the pre-show notes. This is rad as hell.
No, like I said, I just got back from my sojourn amongst the Tall Pines of Bohemian Grove, and I made a certain deal with a certain demon, and I think it's really going to improve our ratings.
I was going to say this could be great for a late night TV show.
Right. Yeah, I think this is really going to improve our ratings because we're a perennial also ran, and we're just having a really hard time competing with Johnny Carson. But I think that this will help us quite a bit
on Twitch. Competing with Johnny Carson on Twitch.
Right. Yeah, I think this will help us. This will help us quite a bit.
Well, that's really exciting. I'm very excited to do this seance. I was in New Orleans, so I'm feeling really spiritual high. Hi, Sally. I'm back. Made it back. Speaking of Bohemian, I did stop at a Buc-ee's on the way through Alabama, and I did get Bohemian garlic jerky. So I guess you could say that I'm something of an Illuminati myself. Very, very, very. It was a great trip. I'm glad to be back. I drove through Chattanooga on the way down and on the way back, and it was just nice to see how a mid-sized city could be run. Yeah,
bizarro Worcester, nice Worcester.
It was. We're gonna do it. We're gonna take our trip down there, and we're gonna document what a small to mid-sized city should be doing for
right.
Let's face it, a pretty right-wing state. Able to get a lot of things done. Not even really the most liberal outpost in Tennessee either. So they did. Congrats to the Volkswagen workers in Tennessee. Won the first auto workers union in like over 20 years, I think. Maybe 30 years.
Dang.
Yeah. I'd like to think that I helped by just driving through the city
Your
the day the vote happened.
In general. Yeah.
An inspiration to them all.
Truly.
What'd you think of Buc-ee's?
Listen, this is my thing with Buc-ee's. Okay, it's if you're judging it against what it is, which is a gas station.
Yeah,
it's clearly the best gas station.
It really is the best gas station in the world. I mean, what other gas station can you buy a full set of Adirondack chairs and you go booze?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's if we're judging it, if we want to judge it against a 5-star restaurant, then sure, yeah. the pulled pork sandwich isn't that good. But if you judge it against a mobile station, a Cumberland Farms, any of those,
Flying J.
Yeah, it blows it out of the water. Come on.
I've never been.
I don't know, man.
But I have a best friend who outfitted his entire family with Bucky's pajamas for Christmas. Both of his kids were head to toe in the beaver, and people love it. They genuinely love it.
Yeah, listen, I'm not going to make it my whole personality, but
do you know why people really love it though? Is they don't allow tractor trailers in there, so it's cars only. Which is like you don't even notice when you're there because it's like 80 pumps, so it's like you can't even see the end of the
it's a truck stop, but it's not.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's the opposite. They don't allow trucks.
Not like damn Loves, which is filthy with truckers.
Don't talk shit about Loves.
Loves is the best showers, I will say.
So pull up this photo if you can here, Brian, before we bring Etel on. This was one of the. This was one night a friend of mine.
The Bohemian Grove.
Exactly. Right? So a buddy of mine was just walking by the back room at Joey's one night, probably a decade ago. But so let's go around the horn. That's Jordan Levy. So here, let me get my mouse in here. That's Jordan Levy, Jim O'Brien, Mike O'Brien, Bob Moylan, the old DPW director. Can never remember his name, but was a city councilor. Old police chief Ed Gardella, city clerk Rushford, Steve Abramoff used to be a clerk of courts, and I can't remember who this was here, but it was another person, as well as this guy here. But it was like, they're all there, right? Like people actually pretend like there isn't this small group of people running the entire city. They're literally right there, like running the whole fucking city. Yeah. Incredible shit. But
your file name is great too.
Yeah. I didn't know what else. I mean, what else are you going to call that one? That's
Brandon, can you send that to me?
Of course. Again, this is like,
that's
half the people in that photo are dead now, but it was just, wild stuff.
That's who hired Eric Batista, not the city council.
All right.
Sorry, Etel. Anyway.
Trying to save the most troubling things to say until after it's off the air. Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's. Do we have anything else? Any other pressing issues that we want to bring up before we bring Etel on?
No. I think that the reason we're bringing Etel on tonight, especially, is because of the Supreme Court oral arguments yesterday on the question of whether it's illegal to exist if you don't have an apartment. And Etel is maybe one of the best people in the entire country to talk to about that issue, a real expert on homelessness and housing issues. So I think that it's going to be a great talk.
Let's bring on right now Etel Haxhiaj, District 5 Councilor, let's just say the Queen of Worcester. I'm going to say
the Queen. Yeah, the Queen of Worcester.
The absolute
best.
Hey
y'all, how's it going?
Yo.
Good. Great, Etel. Thank you so much for coming on with us.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So is this a better or worse experience than a city council meeting for you?
Oh, this?
So far. Yeah, so far.
We'll have to see until the end of the conversation.
Depends on whether we keep you here for 5 hours, right?
It's nice to get a little break from council, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So like I said before you came on, big news coming out of Washington this week, and I was wondering if you could just share sort of your overall takeaway from the oral arguments at the Supreme Court on the grants pass ruling on yesterday.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that a lot of us in the housing advocacy and homelessness prevention community knew that this was going to be, and most likely this is going to be a decision that's not going to be in favor of the plaintiff, Gloria Johnson, who brought in the case. But I think I had two reactions. One was, really happy to see so many people rally in front of, in DC, in front of the Supreme Court, including a lot of unhoused folks who were leading some of that organizing. And then the flip side of that was just hearing some of the oral arguments and, just kind of that sinking feeling that at the end of June, most likely this decision will be what we expect it to be, which is not in favor of the plaintiff, and it's going to be in favor of the Grants Pass, which is the city of Grants Pass that is unfortunately doing what a lot of cities across America are doing, which is criminalizing and punishing folks that really are at the mercy, like I've said many times, of local elected officials and the federal and state governments.
Right. Now, for people who might not know, can you explain what exactly Grants Pass did that got them here?
Yeah, so Grants Pass is a city in Oregon, and Gloria Johnson and her partner, Gloria Johnson is one of the plaintiffs. What she was fined and for being unhoused. The lower court decided in favor of her originally in 2018, which basically prevented the city of Grants Pass from finding folks who cannot find safe shelter. So it's not just about not finding any shelter, it's about not finding safe shelter. And that's an important distinction to make, because a lot of people will claim that we have enough spaces, people refuse to go, but very few people that are on the flip side of homelessness response system, they claim that a lot of people refuse to go because they're just ungrateful people. So Gloria Johnson fought back, and she was able to get the lower courts to decide in her favor. The city of Grants Pass aggressively fought back and brought the case to the Supreme Court. So at the heart of this case is essentially whether the city of Grants Pass has permission to fine and criminalize people up to $500 for sleeping outside. And I'm going to make a very clear distinction here. It's not just sleeping outside. So it's basically if a person is shutting their eyes or snoozing on a park bench, have a pillow or a blanket, they will be fined up to $500. It was $375. Now it's $500. And it doesn't matter whether they have an option to go. It doesn't matter whether they can't go somewhere because they feel unsafe. The city has the power and the ability to fine them. And eventually we know that a lot of the folks who are in a house don't have $375 every single day to pay in fines. So they all end up in jail or accruing quite a lot of debt.
Right. And also outstanding warrants for like failure to pay the fines too.
Yeah, and we know that the cycle that then creates is you can get housing, you can get a job, you fall further down the rabbit hole of criminalization, and that's just cruel and unusual punishment, 10 times over.
Right. So I should have done this for you as you came on if I was like a good radio personality or host or whatever, but can you just explain some of your experience in the field of homelessness and housing for listeners who might just consider you to be a city councilor and not know that other stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I have worked in our family homeless shelter system, both directly servicing folks, families, who are experiencing homelessness, also doing public advocacy and policy work at the state level, at the local level, obviously, and most recently nationally working with the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council that works at the intersection of healthcare and homelessness. So in that particular position, I'm not going to share a lot about an exciting project that I worked on, but it involved essentially interviewing folks around the country, including service providers and folks experiencing homelessness about their experience in living in encampments.
Right. Now, that's great and all, but do you ever go up to people at gas stations and ask them how they feel about homeless people in the city? Is that something that you base your public policy on and your decisions in Worcester?
I hope that if I ever get to that point, that people privately and publicly shame me for it.
What if we had a Buc-ee's? We had like 80 gas pumps that you could walk up to. That would probably be
it's never been the choice of forming public policy to walk up to anybody at the gas station. Thankfully, I don't think I'll ever get there.
So, I listen to the oral arguments too, and I was sort of struck by how much some of these Supreme Court justices sounded like the kind of people who form their public policy by walking up to people at a gas station and asking them how they feel about things. And the one that sticks in my mind, and I'm writing about it, and the one that I pulled out to be like, this is really, they jumped the shark on this one, is when Neil Gorsuch was like, what about urinating and defecating outside? You know, is that a status or a conduct? And then one of the, I can't remember who it was, but one of the other ones literally pulled the classic Worcester line of asking, does it matter if they're from here? Does it matter if homeless people are in their hometown? Right. So I was wondering if there's any lines of inquiry that you heard on Monday that particularly jumped out to you as being, I don't know, noteworthy for any reason, but
yeah,
leave it up to
those two were some of the ones that made me cringe a lot. And I think some of the other ones are arguments that we've heard before, right? It's like, well, why can't they just go to shelter? And one of the attorneys for Gloria Johnson said, well, it's a fact that sometimes shelters do not accept pets or they don't accept significant others. So they're not safe places for people to go. So somebody has the constitutional right not to be forced into treatment, which is a line of argument that I've heard a lot in Worcester among pundits is why can't we just force people to go into treatment? Whereas decades of research tells us that involuntary treatment not only is, in my opinion, unconstitutional, but it also just doesn't work, which is why we take a public health approach and work with people to get them to a point where they can be ready, and we meet them where they are. And so that was one of the things that that caught my attention. And obviously the whole I think so. Justice Sotomayor did a really good job to pointing out that if somebody is sleeping on the beach, for example, like she has done many times, does that constitute grounds for punishing people? And the attorney was like, no. And she reported back and said, well, oh, is that why? Because I am not experiencing homelessness. So basically you're targeting people based on something.
Right.
And so it was good it was good to hear some of the justices very calmly and logically explain how ridiculous all these arguments were from the attorney that was representing the city. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it made me think a lot about the conversations that I have had, especially this past election cycle and things that I see online, but also lines of argument that the folks like me or folks who have done this work longer than I have heard for decades. And it's just my fear and my anxiety with this court case lies in the fact that it's elevating all these arguments to a level that might give people, if the ruling goes the way that I expect it to go, it will have a chilling effect on both the unhoused community and, in my opinion, vigilante hostility that they might experience, which is something that goes underreported greatly. And it might embolden a lot of cities and towns, whether they're perceived as red or blue states or cities and towns, that to go down a line of criminalization that's probably harsher than what we see right now.
Right. Yeah. That's something that really.
That thing's
right. Right. And that's something that I want to talk about is like, if we can sort of take for granted that the vote is going to be, whatever it is, 5-3, or it's probably going to be majority in favor of the city. Let's just use Worcester as like the sort of hypothetical. What would that allow a city like Worcester to do that it's not already doing?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And it's something I've thought about a lot, both for our city's perspective, but also, in towns and cities of the folks that I had the privilege of talking to and learning from their experiences, what that ruling will do for them. So if there's two scenarios, right? So if the Supreme Court rules in favor of Gloria Johnson, then what that means is that they can't obviously fine people from sleeping outside, and in theory, right? This is all in theory. If it goes the other way, in theory, it means that cities and towns can say, well, the Supreme Court has given me carte blanche. This is not unconstitutional. It protects cities from potentially being sued, like Gloria Johnson did, and that's my biggest fear. If that goes that way, then advocacy organization like the National Law Homelessness Center, for example, cannot take cases on behalf of plaintiffs or advocates. So cities like ours,
interesting.
yeah. So that's just my anxiety.
Yeah.
And working closely with those folks for a while, I think that for cities like ours, it's going to be super interesting to see how this plays out. We don't currently have a policy on paper other than you can't camp, for example, in parks. Like that's embedded within the ordinances around that govern the running of the parks. We don't have an ordinance on paper that says this is what happens if you sleep in a public space. This is what happens if you do X, Y, Z. However, if the Supreme Court rules against Gloria Johnson, then it might push more cities like ours to say, well, now I think I should have something on paper to protect ourselves. So it is more important, in my view, that we advocates and those of us on council, and particularly those of us and advocates that have connections with the unhoused community, that we really try to figure out what will be a path forward if the Supreme Court rules against the plaintiff.
Right.
And I can talk about solutions, but I don't know that we have any clarity or will or willingness to really go down the path, because those solutions tend to be either long-term, they take a lot of money, or are not seen as desirable by a lot of people and stakeholders.
Etel, have you heard any conversations on the state level to try and get ahead of whatever, or behind, I guess it could be too at this point, since it's so close, this ruling? I mean, I'm going to draw a comparison just to when Roe was relitigated. That it shocked me that so much time had gone by where Massachusetts didn't take any opportunity to codify protections for women's reproductive health into our state constitution. Do you know if there's any conversations happening on a state level to try and get ahead of things and say, we're just going to make sure that cities and towns don't have, similar to some of the concerns you argued? I guess my biggest fear with all of this is that logically you can see sort of a game theory play out where most cities are probably going to say, well, if we don't pass an ordinance now, that means all the surrounding towns will pass ordinances and people are going to flood here. So we got to pass ordinances ahead of everyone else.
Oh, good point. Jeez,
you end up with a situation where everyone, even if they're typically a community that would be not necessarily hostile to the unhoused, feel pressured into getting ahead of providing services in a way that they're not capable of. But it bums me out that in the Commonwealth, like, we have the political capital to do big things like this, but we, for whatever reason, don't seem to spend it. And I don't know. I just wasn't sure if you've heard anything on the state level to try and sort that out.
No, it's a really good question. And I haven't heard a single thing. And I think that's partly because in Massachusetts right now, there's in my view, at least, there's a big war being waged against both families experiencing homelessness in the shelter system being conflated with the migrants coming in, and somehow they're now responsible for creating homelessness, as if we haven't had decades of failed policies and misallocation of funds, misdirection of funds. So I am not surprised that I haven't heard the state kind of delve in and telling cities and towns a directive of how to deal with this, because this is such a politically hot issue. Just like rent control is, just like, anything that has to do with zoning is. So I don't expect the state or the legislature to take a position on this. They're already, talking about putting families. And they're not talking about, a lot of the families experiencing homelessness are ending up in army bases because we can't accept any more families in shelter. And I have to say, for individuals experiencing homelessness, that's even a more unsympathetic cause, because a family with kids, it's a family with children, whereas a single individual is often boxed in, they're addicts, they're this, they're that, they're there's less sympathy for individual unsheltered homeless folks rather, than families, for example. So I am not at all optimistic that there will be any sort of organized action. I think that what's going to happen is that probably advocates that do this work are going to try their best to protect the people that they serve, whether that's in encampments that are visible to the public or not. And I think that there will be a movement, even though it's controversial even amongst advocates, to push for interim solutions like places where people can be protected from the threat of arrest, coupled with providing services from even, starting from hygiene, basic hygiene needs to support and wraparound services. There is just in this past year, we've seen an uptick in 12% nationally. So that's upwards of 600,000 people that are experiencing homelessness, and half of those people sleep outside. That's nationally. So close to 250,000 people sleep outside on any given night. So cities and towns are seeing more people entering homelessness than they are seeing people exiting homelessness. And we are depending on a federal government that's more interested in supporting wars than it is to house a lot of these folks, which I think we can house if we had enough money and support.
Well, that number jumps out to me as well, because when you think like the human number there is huge. That's too many people, experiencing homelessness. But in the grand scheme of things that we do in this country, it feels like such a small number for the outsized controversy that it's garnering. People like the blame that's being put on unhoused people personally. There's not that many of them when you really think about it. And two, for if we prioritized it, how easy it would be to do something about to fix. I mean, it's not even hard to say. We could fix it,
especially on a federal level. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket from a federal expenditures perspective.
Right. It's like one F-35 would solve homelessness.
Just a real quick point I think is important to make. While I am not Etel's campaign manager, I am a constituent, and I would like to point out to any future boneheads that might think about running against them. Etel did say the word zoning about 5 minutes ago, but she did not advocate for ending single-family zoning. So I just want to make that clear to all boneheads, current or future. She just said the word zoning. She didn't say anything about changing zoning. So
I did not.
Etel, I'm remembering now to Brian's question, you one time threw out an idea that's even more just awful and communistic and terrible than ending single family zoning. You threw out the idea of municipal bonding for interim solutions to the current homelessness crisis. And that's obviously like a mile outside the Overton window of Worcester politics. And you wouldn't be able to get that passed on the city council floor in any way. But I'm wondering if you could explain that to here, where at least I am a person who thinks that's a great idea. So what would that entail?
So the city of Houston City Council passed this idea, I think, maybe 2 years ago. And what it entails is just like we did with other big expenditures, like the Polar Park, for example, where the city government borrows a certain amount of dollars to fill the gaps of those things that we say we can't do. I think it's important to mention, however, that, I am very realistic that cities like ours are sort of in a bind sometimes because we spend our monies the way that we spend our monies. But a lot of the responsibility to finance and to essentially capitalize the expenditures that it takes to both build housing, permanent supportive housing, but also to support our homelessness provider system, which is a big, big, big part of resolving and at least taking care of our folks, falls on, it shouldn't just fall basically on cities and towns. So I propose that idea because if we are doing that, if we're pulling out bonds for big expenditures like Polar Park, we should be able to then kind of do the same thing for important issues like protecting human beings and trying to the best of our abilities to fill the gap that the state and the federal government aren't filling. And
Right.
Etel, when you say Houston, that Houston in Scandinavia, Houston, Netherlands, which what Houston was that? Actually,
surprisingly, it's in the United States.
yeah, no, I just this is the second
it's
time.
actually in Texas, which is actually a separate place from the United States.
But the second time this week that like it just oddly, right? I mean, last week we learned that Texas is well, the first high-speed rail actually broke ground today from connecting Las Vegas, Nevada to Southern California, but Texas is also ahead of most states in terms of high-speed rail and transportation. It's actually kind of interesting seeing what in the Northeast we consider to be, our arch nemesis politically is doing all of the things politically that we claim are completely impossible.
And they have reduced their numbers of unsheltered folks. In fact, I had the chance of speaking to the director of one of their programs. And what they did is they partnered with our version of Mass DOT because, a lot of folks were getting killed, in train tracks. And so their Department of Transportation said to them, hey, we know that you have expertise in resolving homelessness. Why don't we partner together so that instead of folks getting killed, instead of us having to essentially police people, we will give you land where you can then set up either emergency shelters or some of these other programs that when I talked to them, I was like, wow, we could actually do that here. And
so easily.
Yeah. And so they continued that partnership and they're still continuing that partnership. Yeah. And the director of the program said, this is one of the very few examples in the country where a state agency has said to a homelessness provider, we recognize that this is a problem. Why don't we work together? And instead of us having to spend resources on getting people arrested, we will partner with you. We will lend you the land and you do the work that you're good at. Yeah. And that's how they've been able to reduce the numbers. I can't imagine that Mass DOT would agree to something like that, but it's just stuck in my head as one example as to why they've been successful.
But the question on that is why wouldn't the Mass DOT, why wouldn't they agree to that? Like if we're, is it something about these red states that they're so comfortably red that they've gone so far around the bend that people are just can
Bryan,
listen to common sense progressive solutions?
I don't know if anybody has reached out to Mass DOT. I definitely thought about it.
I think the problem, Bryan, is, and I mean, there is a lot of research on this, that it's because liberal states, unfortunately, have made it almost illegal to do anything productive by way of regulation and whatnot. Like in the 50s and 60s, we created so many well-intentioned regulations that today seem antiquated, and they're really used as a cudgel by folks. And we see it in Worcester all the time too. Like you could never have a conversation about the way we do things from a zoning, or God forbid you touch a road, right? Like there are so many legal ways to hold something up. It almost becomes not worth trying to propose the good idea in the first place. Again, I promise I'm not becoming an apologist for Texas just because my son goes to school there, but housing is the same thing. If you look at the three major metros in Texas have the fastest decreasing cost of housing in the nation right now. Yeah. And so, I mean, their growth is through the roof from a population perspective. Jobs make what we claim to be amazing since the end of COVID look petty. And at the same time, it costs less to live in downtown Austin than it does in the outskirts of Worcester. And that's kind of weird.
I'm glad you mentioned that because the recent report that came out about how horrible the housing conditions are in Worcester, it just made me think about three things. One is that a community experiences, by data and research, this is not something that I made up, but a community experiences an increase in homelessness numbers if there's three indicators. One is the vacancy rate is really low, which we are at the lowest that we've ever been.
In the country, baby.
And what that is essentially just not being able to find apartments for people to live in, whether the landlords are maybe holding off because for whatever reason, or they just are not, they're not in a healthy condition to rent them out. The second one is the income levels in Worcester, in the city of Worcester. I think it's about $45,000, the area median income, and it's the gap between wages and that income, which, you know, it determines whether someone can spend more than 30-40% of their income on housing and food, for example. Right. So those conditions are present in Worcester, which means that we are going to see a large number of people entering homelessness, whether they're families or whether they're individuals.
And while I'm not saying, I'm not at all, just to be clear, suggesting that we don't need regulations to protect the way we do things, but like if we have a housing emergency, we also know that if say someone did come up with the bonding capacity to rethink modern public housing as a short, and did it under an emergency status, just the environmental studies alone would make the cost of that project so high that it would actually be luxury housing. And then you'd have people say, well, we can't afford to do that. So we end up just frozen in place through the best of intentions, and that's a really stupid way to be frozen in place.
When we've had the same, you know, our well-intentioned regulations, like you said, have been around or stuck for so long that they're just like used by bad faith actors as
they're unfortunately
used
status quo to keep my neighborhood over in West Hatnick looking the same way it has since the end of World War II, and I dare any of you to change it, right? It's like,
it's almost like the way to solve this problem is to get rid of single families.
You did it.
That wasn't not just to be clear, it wasn't Etel saying that.
I feel like
me and Etel vehemently disagree on that point. But I want to take it back to the criminalization of homelessness, because what I'm writing about this week is this sociological idea of pervasive penality, and how cities have figured out basically how to make homelessness illegal without any sort of outright law on the books. So Worcester doesn't have like a Grants Pass style law where homelessness is directly a crime, right?
Right.
But we do have, you know, trespassing, outstanding warrants, move along. So I don't even know if this is a fair question to pose to you as a city councilor, but what are some of the ways you see that homelessness might already be like sort of de facto illegal in communities around the country or Worcester specifically?
No, I've been very transparent publicly and in conversations, whether people vehemently agree or disagree with me, that the reality is that we practice homelessness prevention on the streets with a punitive lens. And so whether that's, you know, taking in encampments and removing them from one corner of the city to another, or whether that's, you know, making it harder for people who have no other options, other safe options to be in public spaces. Those are practices that, even though they're not codified in our city ordinance, the impact is the same. The impact is the same as having the words on paper. And I think that what's really tough about this particular time and place is that it feels really hard to have these conversations. And I have truly tried very hard using every skill set and every story that I have encountered in my work to empathize with people who feel threatened by the presence of visible, unsheltered homelessness. And I do think that there's a way to bring people into that conversation, but I also believe there's a subset of people, including those who hold power and the ability to make decisions, where this conversation is a non-starter. I think the responsibility of those of us that have whatever little bit of influence and the platform to talk about this and educate people, no matter where they are on the spectrum, is to continue pointing out that there is a reason why housing first works. There's a reason why barring the funding available to do the work that we need to do, treating people with compassion and having that as a starting point, it gives us the ability to both give them the space, the trust that unhoused folks clearly and rightly so don't have with authority figures, to get them to what they need. And they're not a monolith, just like none of us are a monolith. People have different needs. Some have needs for treatment. Some have need for mental health support. Some just need a job. Some just need job training. Some just need a social security card to get to that, to be able to get a job, then to get an apartment. Some need support for 3 months. Some need support for 6 years, right? So it's really frustrating as someone who has seen the success, both from families, both from individuals, and talking to colleagues on the ground who understand this work and see both from a medical perspective, from a public health perspective, and public safety perspective, that none of us really want people to live in inhabitable conditions. Some people may choose to do that because of deep trauma, and they have the right to do so. But I think the majority of people do want the opportunity to live a life that that is good to them, and that they have the ability to choose. And I think it hurts a lot. It really does hurt a lot to hear people say that somehow someone who is unhoused because they lost their job, or they had a family crisis, or they simply couldn't afford rent, which is the majority of people, they somehow are not worthy of being treated in the same way that we would treat a house person. The only difference between, like I said recently on a city council floor, between those of us that have the privilege of support systems and jobs and money and having a roof over our head, is that if we hit any of those crises, we have the privileges and the support systems to get through them, where someone who is living in an encampment and now they're being told the local government will come after you if you shut your eyes in public. Is it being sleep deprived? It's not a form of torture. It is a form of torture. You can't function properly. Your executive function doesn't work properly if you're not sleeping. And that's the majority of folks experiencing homelessness. They can't sleep. If you're a woman and you're constantly harassed, or you're scared of being sexually assaulted, you don't sleep. If you're a domestic violence survivor, you're never at rest. If you're someone who's experienced deep trauma because of whatever, you can't go to a shelter, a congregate shelter that triggers and kicks you out at 7 a.m. in the morning. So I'm not sure where I was going with that, but it's just sort of really tough to have policy conversations with people that are not open to listening to the experts, and most importantly, to the folks that are struggling with homelessness. They know best.
Right. And that's something that I've struggled with personally a lot and written a lot about, is like, Worcester's not unique in this, but, focusing on Worcester is a good way to see this sort of thing in America, I suppose, about how we're really quick to just dehumanize unhoused people entirely, and posit them as them as existing is the problem. Being able to see them is the problem, not the conditions that produce that set of reality for somebody to fall into. It's the fact that they're there.
And they're expected to be perfect. And they're expected to be perfect.
Right.
They're expected to just be perfect, as if that expectation is not put on any of us. It's just, maybe I'm not explaining that right, but just the expectations that folks have of unhoused people and treating them as if they're not part of our community, they're not our residents.
Right. It's like the way that the term like junkie, for instance, is thrown around. Right. Like as if nobody with an apartment has ever been a heroin addict, right?
Correct.
And
well, it's the same way. It goes the same with when you get into any conversations about privilege with people that either deny their own or don't see the concept of it, is that none of us are above any of these issues. None of us are even separate from any of these issues. Every one of us has struggles that would put us in desperate situations and has had throughout our lives if we didn't have a support system around us, whether it's our family, friends, whatever. None of us would have the jobs that we have. None of us would have the housing situations we have. None of us would have the lives that we have without community. And a lot of us are lucky enough that that's blood that does that. Or, family connections, like neighborhood connections, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But some people don't have that. And to just deny their humanity based on that is obviously wrong, but so often is the one thing that people can't see. They can't see where they've got tangible advantages that would change 180 degrees, change anybody's life if they just had one chance at that. If they got the one job that I got because of my dad's friend, or
and I think what's hard is that like when I talk about the expectations that people have, we all have experienced trauma or stress in some way, shape, or form, or a crisis. And like I said, the difference is we can get through them without jeopardizing our well-being because we have resources and access to networks. But I think that what's really tough is that, people think sheltering people is considered housing. I mean, I want to remind people that I'm the first one to say, yes, we absolutely need more safe shelters. We need shelters for women. We need inclusive spaces for the LGBTQ community, just like the veteran community has been able to resolve and reduce the number of vets because the vet system figured out if we actually wrap around resources around vets, we can actually bring them out of homelessness a lot faster. We don't do that with other subpopulations that are unhoused because we clump everybody together. But my point is that even if we had more shelter beds, sheltering people is not housing. It's just a temporary stop. And hopefully the temporary stop is equipped with wraparound resources, well-trained workers who are trauma-informed. It's equipped with resources for people. So whether that's healthcare or connecting them to job trainings for those who need them, or for people who maybe left the house, the work market and just need a little bit more support. People who are coming from incarceration is another population that we never really talk about. I mean, talking about the obstacles that someone who's been incarcerated faces in the job market, in just general in society, but the housing market, you can get a job. It's so narrow, the opportunities that you have. So like we can actually we can come up with some interim solutions while we wait for the long term and the ultimate goal, which is to house every person. The problem is that we are not willing to talk about those interim solutions because they're controversial, because they require some sacrifices from a lot of us. And I don't really know I'm taking off all my hats, my advocate head and my local elected official head. I don't know how we can expect, 5 years worth down the road for projects to be completed just to get, 19 beds here and 20 beds there. That's great. That's what I want. I want to create more of those opportunities. But I cannot live with the fact that in the meantime, we cannot talk about solutions because they're controversial, because we know that people like me will lose elections if I go out and say we do need to have spaces for people other than shelters, alternate places and alternate spaces where we can equip people with wraparound services and what they need, instead of relegating to an encampment being disbanded here and an encampment being disbanded there. I personally cannot live with that. I mean, I know that I'll probably face consequences for keep saying that, but I think that if more of us are willing to take that risk, then maybe we can shift public opinion slowly, just like some other communities have.
That's an interesting point, because I think that the way that this sort of like reactionary hostility to unhoused people manifests in public policy, in Worcester specifically, I'm talking about, is from Augustus to Batista, I saw this weird idea that we're doing housing first, which means permanent supportive housing. So we can't do temporary shelters. We can't do interim solutions because permanent supportive housing is more desirable. That little either or rhetorical cudgel there, it does so much damage to the just getting any sort of like productive conversation off the ground. And I wonder if you've noticed that, because you've spoken a lot about how it's not an either or issue, but I think in Worcester we're stuck in that either or. If we build temporary supportive measures, then we can't build the permanent stuff. And I wonder if you could speak on that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have seen at least a more of an open willingness from the current manager to actually sit down with advocates, and he attends some of those meetings that I have asked for and we asked for, but willingness to listen and then facing the political pressures to actually actualize some of these interim solutions are two different things. And I'll continue. I'm not afraid of saying that I have spoken to the manager publicly, privately about these interim solutions, because I feel like they're a matter of life and death for people. And we absolutely cannot wait and we cannot employ that approach of either or in order to respond and protect folks who are so vulnerable to all these conditions that we've talked about until this housing conditions materialize. And especially because we have more people coming into homelessness that there are exiting. So we may be waiting, another 5 to 6 years to fully house every person and prevent every person that's on the verge of housing instability that has the potential to enter full homelessness. That's the other part of the equation that a lot of the folks that I talk to refuse to believe, because they don't believe, because this is hidden, right? There's people who are doubled together and families who are, living in crowded quarters, for example, that are at risk. So, yeah, I absolutely think, Bill, that...
Well, Etel, let me stop you right there. Why don't they just choose to live in a single-family neighborhood?
Again.
I mean, that's a choice, right?
Yeah, I think that there's just so much to unpack just in that one statement. But
yeah, you're right.
I think that it's time that we move away from this either or, because it's proven that it just doesn't work. Right. And for people to understand that just because we create temporary shelters that go 3 to 4 months, that's good, because we can shelter people from the elements in the wintertime. But it breaks your heart when you have to, like at the end of June. I think it's the R&B shelter, and to the manager's credit, he did go out to bat for that shelter to actually extend a longer time. How do you tell that many people that live there, you're back on the street and we'll see you next, we'll see you maybe next, right. Next whatever, December. We're up against a lot. And I think that if we had more people that were willing to, decision makers that were willing to just kind of understand that these are things that are not luxuries, they're life and death solutions, right? To prevent people from getting harmed further. We could get a little bit further, but I don't know that we're there.
Right. How do you create the same public pressure and the same calculus in the opposite direction, where like the city administration is afraid to not do the things that it should be doing instead of afraid to do the things that it should be doing?
Especially in the context, Bill, of that the framing of either or. I mean, I can't help but naturally last week when I was reading your piece, you scathing bit on the economist view of like building homes, right? Like the trickle down idea that you just build more houses, prices go down. And it's like, I can't help but like knee jerk get furious when I read stuff like that, because it's like
trickle down, baby.
But every economist, regardless of political persuasion, does agree that long term, that is like more stock is what brings prices down. But to your point, it also is completely fucking irrelevant, because the idea is you got X number of people who have no place to go today, So
Right.
yeah, build more houses, but those don't come online for another 5 to 10 years. Like, so that doesn't do anybody any good. It misses the point entirely that, like, and again, kind of goes back to this idea that we're also frozen in place because the time to construct anything takes
Yes.
so long.
So long.
And we're also, we should know, if there's anything we learned during COVID, hopefully it's that we suck at exponential growth.
Yes.
So like, while if those numbers are rising, that number is in all likelihood going to continue going hard up to the right until it starts going hard down to the right. And there's no sign of it going down. So it's going to keep going up. And yeah, we don't have a community that's good at figuring for that. I would love, I don't know if that's something that's even conceivable, but can we try and not, I know you're probably already thinking about this, so I'm not talking to you just in general, but is there a way to get your colleagues to start having conversations about our shelter capacity when it's actually warm out, as opposed to like waiting to when like we're back into seeing frost on the ground, when we just, we should probably talk about this now. I feel like that was very frustrating last year, that the snow was already falling when the majority of your colleagues decided, okay, now is the right time to start thinking about what we might do this winter.
And a lot of work that was invisible to the public from, folks who were really trying to go to congregations and neighborhoods that said, no, absolutely not. You cannot come here. It like when I say that we're up against a lot, I really mean that we're up against a lot, and not all of it is visible to the public. Not all of it is spoken about, but I think that, I think that even if we got up to the capacity, so we're short about 200 the last time that I asked,
200-ish, yeah.
I think that the trouble is that congregate shelters are not always conducive, and this is based on both my observations, but also most importantly for folks who live in them, because for the reasons that I mentioned, you can bring your significant other, you get kicked out during the day, you can't bring a certain amount of belongings. There's just so many obstacles that would prevent a person from feeling safe. And like, again, if the expectation as an elected official is that I have that I have the privilege of feeling safe, so should every single person that doesn't have the privileges that I have. And so I want people to understand that just because someone says, I don't feel safe going to a congregate shelter, they're not wrong. They're just expressing what is the reality. Everybody should have the expectation of feeling safe. And so what I want to see in terms of solutions is I want to see more non-congregate shelters. What that means is that every person gets their own space. I want to see the ability for us to have a conversation around what I've seen in other communities, which is basically spaces where folks can stay without the threat of arrest, and the municipality supports them with basic necessities and wraparound services. I want to see a more coordinated effort, both from the state and the city, which I think, to Eric's credit, to the manager's credit, he's actually beating the drum at the state. Like, you need to make sure you're expediting this projects that are being hauled up because the bank won't close. And so it's like a 3-4 different trains that are moving in parallel direction for us to be able to manage the crisis that we have at hand. So yes, shelters are just a piece of the puzzle. I would prefer that we have more non-congregate shelters. That would require that we actually create the spaces for them. And the best model that we've seen based on California's Room Keep project during COVID was for the city and the municipality or the state to invest in purchasing hotels and motels for a short time and turning them into basically single room occupancy and giving people the right support services. That's also important, right? Picking the right service providers and making sure that workers are trained in trauma and providing the support that unhoused folks need.
Yeah, that sounds much better than what we're
currently doing, which is nothing.
yeah. Well, and you know what? I would love to live in a world where the character of like the neighborhood is not as important as these things, but that really does, to my mind, seem to be the major political battle in front of us right now. Because, you know, I just moved in with my girlfriend, and I'm in the Greendale now, And God, I got to tell you, it's I'm 3 blocks away from the Zion Lutheran Church. It's a goddamn war zone over here. It's crazy. It completely ruined the neighborhood, right? I mean, of course I'm kidding. But the way that people talked about that family shelter going on to the Zion Lutheran Church was that it was going to ruin the neighborhood. And I drive by it like twice a day now, and the neighborhood seems completely fine. And that was all just unfounded reactionary anger. And like, how do we get to a point where we can just ignore that and call it what it is, right? I don't know.
Or not get punished for saying what you just did.
Right. Yeah. Well, you can't punish me because I have no power, so I'll say it all I want. But maybe that's how we get there. We just shout at them. Anyway,
I think that raises a good point though, because we do I know Etel what you went through in this last election, based on a lot of the same people that were complaining, that were at the meetings that I was at for this shelter that Bill's talking about. Literally the same people, because they just go around the city and do this everywhere that people are trying to help.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, you won. And this one, and yeah, it's not good that it was that hard, but you won, and there are more people that agree with us than don't. There are more people that are on your side than are on the other side, and there definitely needs to be more pressure on people that aren't willing to help, especially decision makers, like you said, elected officials. But the vast majority of people, I think, would rather help than hurt, and it's just a matter of breaking through to the people that actually have a say in this. And unfortunately, they're proven to be the most stubborn. But I do think that you standing up and taking the lead on this is it's not a negative to most people. I think most people are inspired by it, and that's one district. And if we had the rest of the council, if we had candidates in every district and at large that were willing to go more, get out in front of it like you are and be more proactive with it, then I do think that we'd see even more of it. Obviously it's a hard road to go down. It's a pressure filled road, and it's not, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I do want to thank you for doing what you do and for taking that path, because I think it is necessary, and I think it is important for people to see that you're winning this, in small ways. You are winning this fight, and it's possible to get something done to take care of people. And that's really all that it comes down to. There's no perfect solution. There's no perfect way to go about it. What we're trying to do is take care of people. And
at the end of the day, regardless of what came my way or Councilor Nguyen or anybody else who advocated for the same things that we're talking about, like I said, at the end of the day, we have safe homes to go to, and none of us are dealing with the stresses of, sleeping under the elements, or where, the next person is going to come and ruin what I consider my home. And so I take the ability and the privilege that I have to have a platform very seriously, but I think I won't feel comfortable and I won't feel like any victory has been won until we see, at the bare minimum, at least some of these things that are proven to be successful for some communities, be actualized. And I think it's going to take more than 1 or 2 or 3 voices on council. I think you're right. That's one part of the puzzle. I think the provider community has an important role to play. And I think our state legislators have a very important role to play too. I don't think any cities and towns can do this alone. I really don't. Even the ones that have been successful, they have had millions of dollars poured from the state or for the federal government. And we are even though we do have a convening plan, a convening body in the Worcester County, the continuum of care, like I said, I think that a lot of the folks that are doing this work are feeling defeated because there's way more people that are coming into homelessness. And that's not because, I mean, that's like, Brendan, you were saying, right? That's because of housing, that's because of incomes, that's because of the wage gap. And we can't keep up with the amount of need that there's out there.
Right. And I mean, and and just to clarify too, like all of that at the end of the day is irrelevant. There are people that are unhoused. And if it's a national problem, which it is, even though it's curiously one of those problems that we tend to focus on a local level, which I always find very suspicious that we kind of view ourselves in every community across the country as that we're somehow unique and this is only happening here. But there are just
funny how that works.
I mean, I know everyone has their own take on how government is supposed to function. There are some things that just don't make sense to handle on a state or local level, right? Their problems are just too big. Infrastructure doesn't make sense to try and tackle on like a local level, right? Like having a federal highway system makes sense. Whatever. I mean, there's no shortage of, when it comes to major utilities or whatnot, it just scales better when it's done from the highest level down. And you also have that view to see where resources are most appropriately placed. It's another area where I just can't see, again, when you look at that number that we're currently estimating for this year for the unhoused population, it's a huge number, but it's also a trivial number when you look at like from a federal scale. Like it's a moderately sized community, right? It's not man, we have the resources and the political capital. Yes, like right now to just do something, right? And then we can have Bill and I can argue about the right way to structure long-term housing plans from a market-based system, right? Like that's when that becomes relevant again, when you are down to the only people living in tents doing so by choice.
Well, Brendan, hold on. I think this is kind of unfair to the U.S. government. If there's no visible homelessness in cities around America, how are we supposed to get people to sign up for the army?
Oh my gosh!
We don't have a draft, right?
I want to hear this. I want to hear what it tells.
Can I just make one last point before I go? So I know.
Yeah.
I am not advocating, because I know that there in some corners people might be saying, "What is she saying?" I'm not advocating at all for an approach that some communities are taking. Right, the motivation is not to support people who are unhoused, remove the threat of arrest, and in the meantime, provide them with the stability, the physical, mental, spiritual, emotional stability that they need to then just take a breath and stabilize, and then provide them with the support services they need. There's a think tank called Cicero that's actually advocating for what I would call an internment camp. It's basically where you involuntarily take people in unhoused folks. You remove, the ability for service providers to go there, and it's just basically like a way to say, out of mind, out of sight. We don't care. Let them, let those addicts just kind of be alone. I'm not advocating for that.
It's also literally a concentration camp.
And then that's where advocates are scared of, that some of these interim approaches are being motivated. Like the motivation is not to support people, but it's just to appease people who complain that visible homelessness is ruining their neighborhood.
Right. Well, and I mean, it's not just a think tank either. It's not a purely academic concern. I mean, Florida is leading the country on this idea. I mean, didn't Miami just buy land recently
put them on an island? Correct.
To do like an island concentration camp for unhoused people? Like, this is not an academic concern. Right.
It's model legislation that Miami, Tennessee, and some other, I forget, Kentucky, are modeling after the Cicero Institute. And that's just taking an idea that can be supportive to the extreme level. And that's not what I'm advocating for. I think that we need to really look into some best practices, models in communities that have worked, well with this model of not congregate shelter, and use that as a way to support people exiting into housing.
Great. Well,
before you take off, there was a couple questions that came up in the chat. We just wanted to put up if you
Sure.
have opinions on any of these. If not, we can look further into them. I pick up Woo Litter very well. They do community cleanups. They're asking about a logistics question in regards to doing pickups. When we're out doing a cleanup and find clothes or items such as a toothbrush, we're trying to leave them in case someone is planning to return for them. Is there a better way to treat these items that may belong to someone in that area?
I am not sure that I have an answer, but if this person would be willing to email me at my city's email and just leave me contact information, I'm happy to call them and find out more, but I can't come up with an answer at the moment.
Yeah, and we can.
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
Trav, can we throw Etel's email address up when you get a chance?
Yeah, on it.
It's my last name, my first initial at worcesterma.gov.
And then Sally is asking, have we been able to get some of the unhoused on committees or task forces to interact with government and advocates locally?
Have we been able to get some of the unhoused on committees or task forces to interact? The only example that I know is the Samantha who runs Halo, for example, is participating in the monthly meetings with providers that I had to stop going for a while, but I'm going to resume going soon. But she's the only person, as far as I know, with lived experience. There is also one other person in through the continuum of care, a person that I personally worked with who has, by law, continuums of care have to have a person with lived experience on their board, advisory board. And that person, the city government officials do work with them. So Samantha was included only recently when I asked on city council that she become part of his meetings.
Just to work
after her ideas were filed 3 weeks in a row.
Just to work off that last question, because it's something that I rack my brain about all the time. That like so many of the roles that we have for residents to participate in government, like the basic requirement is an address. Has there ever been a conversation about making a change to that so that, like, say, an unhoused person, if they saw there was an opening on, say, the Human Rights Commission, that they could actually try and join, not having a permanent address? Because I think that is one of those things that even like a PO box doesn't count. Like you need
an actual physical address.
Address.
That's a really good question, Brendan. Really, really good point.
And I'm saying it probably assuming that nobody would even sign up, just like the general public, right? Like it's hard to actually fill a lot of those roles. So I'm not trying to scare anybody into thinking that we're going to fill the government with the unhoused, but it's just.
I think that's a great thing to do.
If there was somebody that actually would be a good advocate for that, a good voice for that community, it seems odd that we do.
Yeah.
Push people.
It's a really good point. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that, but yeah, it's a really, really good point.
And then
we should petition that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah, that's a great idea. This last one, I can't remember exactly which part of the conversation it came up in, but I think it's a good general question of like locally, people that are doing the work, what are ways that any of us can support them beyond advocacy and speaking on behalf, which I think are important whenever things come up in city council for people to call in, to write in and things like that. But are there any ways you can think of that people aren't taking advantage of now that they could generally support the work that's being done for these interim solutions and things like that?
I would say it's important to follow the lead of if there's unhoused folks that are organizing, like Samantha, for example, and others, to follow their lead about the asks that they have, both from a material condition, but also just be respectful of their leadership. And I think as an elected, obviously, if people see myself or our other allies on council who align with our values and principles related to what I consider human right approach to homelessness, to pay attention to where we are asking people to direct their advocacy. People know where I stand. I'm very clear about my values, and while I appreciate the emails or the calls sometimes that come to me, I think that it's very clear, for example, who holds true power, and folks should direct that advocacy where they perceive that power to lie.
Eric, what you said? What?
Yeah, that was
Who said that?
masterful.
Who said that? Who said that? So Sam Only's organization is called Halo Worcester, and I'll grab the Instagram link for that. There's I think there's a link to donate and stuff like that. They were actually just at the oral arguments down in DC.
Yes.
That video. I tuned in.
Yeah, I was very, very happy that they had a chance to represent Worcester there. So a lot of it was just from what I could see and talking to some of my colleagues on the ground, it felt like a very powerful message, and I'm very happy that people were very unfiltered at directing their anger and frustration. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Etel, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time so much, and whenever you come on, and thank you for speaking to us and on all these great things. And yeah, keep up, keep on keeping on. We appreciate your work, and I know that I speak for the chat when we say we appreciate you coming here tonight.
All right, sounds good. Thanks so much, all. Take care.
Be well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Etel. Take care.
One more time, in your homes, just stand up and clap for Etel, everybody.
Woo! Here's the Halo Instagram link. I always have trouble finding it for some reason, but definitely.
Travis, you can sit down now. Even though our bodies, we're kind of lining up. Yeah.
I'm trying to make one person.
Oh, that's great, Travis. I thought that was a really great conversation. That was
incredible, and I think that point. I just want to reiterate that point of like, as much as we heap praise on Etel and anyone else that, the allies on the council, I think it's just as important, and in fact way more important, to put pressure on the people that disagree with us or are ambivalent to us or have all the power to do anything about this and choose not to or choose to slow play it. So yes, bother the city manager constantly. That if there's one thing that we can be doing on the show, it's advocating.
It's bothering the city manager.
Bother the city manager. Honestly, that's the only way this show exists. Yeah.
I also think that we need to start thinking more about city council as like in like a Western Front sort of way, where you shift out the front line. Being in the city council is just being in the trenches of taking like artillery fire from these terrible people constantly, and we can't expect anybody to do that for very long.
No, and I think that's an excellent way to think about it. Of like taking away the prestige of it, or the idea that it's like an honorable position to be in, and start thinking about it the way that it's clear that Etel thinks about it as like it's a job that somebody has to do. But also understanding that it's when you're doing it correctly, then it's not enough for, it's too much for one person to handle. So yeah, we need to start throwing bodies at city council. I think.
Yes.
We need to start mulching people through city council.
Right.
It'll
be like our dad.
Psychotic advocates.
Yeah.
There's also a conversation to be had too, in some regard, that when you think that a lot of this comes down to, there are just, as we always refer to, townies who just don't want to see things that they don't like. It's like, I hope there's someone making clear to that body that, like, yeah, we don't want to see that either. Like, and we're actually trying to come up with solutions so that you don't have to, right? By like fixing a problem, not just covering our eyes like toddlers and hoping it goes away.
Yeah.
It's really that seems to be the thing that's ultimately like the flaw, is that there is something in messaging that isn't getting through to angry old white folk that, like, yeah, look, we're not trying to ruin your city. We're actually trying to make it better, right? Like, you don't want unhoused people. Yeah, neither do we. Like, that's actually the whole fucking point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas you want to kill them before they get into a house. We want to put them in a house so they're not unhoused.
Which then, like, helps your tax base that you're always complaining about. You'll have nothing to complain about if you just let us do our thing for a little bit. It'll be awesome.
And you know what? For one, I think that we need to start talking about, okay, Biden, you can bring back the draft, and we will take that in exchange for solving the homelessness problem. Bring back the draft, and if you just, buy one less F-35 and actually build unhoused infrastructure to get make it so that housing is actually a human right. I could live with that. I could live with that personally. And maybe we'll catch his ear on that one, because he's perennially stuck in 1972. So like, I'll be like, oh, the draft, oh, that's a great idea. Let's bring it back. Anyway, so the program today is a twofer, and the next guest that we have on is sort of just as well versed in the way that homelessness manifests itself in Worcester, the way that Supreme Court justices seemed unable to understand or talk about, but from a sort of a different end of it. His name is Chris Robarge. He works for the Massachusetts Bail Fund, which helps people out with, getting out of jail when they get slapped with charges. And he's also one of Bill's minion. Chris, why don't you start by giving a better explanation of the bail fund than I did?
For sure, I can definitely try. The Massachusetts Bail Fund is first and foremost an abolitionist bail fund, I want to be clear about that, because it's a very sort of central part of what we do. We do not believe that anyone should be in jails or prisons like anyone. We operate from an abolitionist framework. And what we actually do on the ground day to day is in 5 counties, including Worcester County, the counties that we serve, we take referrals and we post bail for people who ask us for that help. And the way that looks is generally like our monetary limitation for what we can do per person right now is $1,000. So if you need $1,000 or less to get out of jail, and you are in a place that we have a capacity to be, we will pay that money for you, period. No questions asked. We are a non-judgmental bail fund, so we do not consider people's charges. We do not consider how often they show up to court. We don't care if they have a job, all of those things. There are judgmental bail funds, and there are reasons that they exist in places. There are also sort of very foundational reasons for us that we are a non-judgmental bail fund. So if you need that help, we will provide it to you, period.
Right.
We've been around for about 10 years. I've been in the bail fund's orbit and posting bails for about 9 of those years. First as a volunteer for several years, and then I was hired on as an organizer in 2020. So it is now my paid job, and I am currently the senior organizer at the bail fund.
So part of the idea of bringing you on for this sort of like post Supreme Court homelessness discussion gets back to that idea of the kind of people that are in jail, or what kind of charges people are catching where they're in jail for less than $1,000 cash bail. So and are unable to pay it. So I don't know if you can just talk about that sort of specific reality of the cruelty of the criminal justice system. What kind of charge, and what are the charges of the people you're working with?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is we are actually working on using our database to develop some at least anecdata around kind of the totality of what's in there. We do collect information, for example, on people's housing status when we take referrals. It's not perfect information. It's never going to be like a scientifically rigorous data set, but it is something that we want to be able to refer to for exactly this reason. But what I can tell you anecdotally from years on the ground is that the vast majority of the people that we're posting bail for are housing insecure or unhoused, and usually chronically so. And just to kind of give you an idea of the scale of what we're talking about just in the places we work. So we bail a lot of people. We are the highest volume bail fund in the country by like a lot, actually. So we bail in a busy month, probably 120 to 150 people. And probably about 30 to 40 of those are Worcester County people. Men in Worcester County go to Worcester House, which is just up the road. And then women get sent out to Chicopee. And so, yeah, what we see, I think it's helpful actually to take a step back, and I can break it down this way. There's sort of two modalities here, right? The first is what I would call kind of the arrest to unhoused pipeline, which is where people who are not yet unhoused lose their housing because of an arrest. And so I think this is pretty easy to think about, like if any of you or any most normal people, if you disappeared off the face of the earth for a few days or a few weeks and you have a job, maybe you're going to get 3 no-call, no-shows. Maybe you're going to get less than that. Maybe the end of the month is coming up and you're not around to pay your rent, and the eviction process gets started on you. Maybe you're the person who's the primary like income bringer to your household. And so now you're not just in, danger of losing your housing, but everyone that you live with is as well. And so that's a huge driver. I mean, I see referrals from people all the time that are, this person needs to get out ASAP. They're about to lose their housing. This person needs to get out ASAP. If they can't get out by the end of the week, they're going to lose their job. That happens very regularly. I see it every week. And so that's one piece of it. And then there is what happens when you fall down, that chute, and now you're unhoused. Well, now your existence really is criminalized, even more so than it is for some people who are housed. Basically, everything you do, including where you sleep, where you eat, where you live, is now essentially against the law. You are camping on property that you don't have permission to be on. Maybe you're getting into some kind of abandoned building or something or under an entryway to get out of the elements. You're trespassing. That is, once you're notified, you can be legally charged for that. We see a ton of trespass charges, loitering charges. The city loves to do sweeps where if you don't look like you belong or have money and you're anywhere near a no loitering sign, they'll just pick you up for loitering. I
didn't know that. That's crazy. And Worcester does that?
Worcester does it. A big hotspot for it is the BP over by the Murray Ave Towers.
Wow. Protect BP at all costs. Right. Yeah.
I like to follow. There are others, but I like to sometimes I go in and I just sort of look through the court records for the day, and you can see trends like this. Like, 8 people got arrested for loitering today. Where was it? And you go and you look and you can read the reports, and it's like, yeah, they were sitting in front of a wall that had a no loitering sign. So there you go, off to jail. And then, of course, there's also, the issues of substance use, which is criminalized, mental health issues, which are often criminalized. And so you really get in a place where it is very difficult for most unhoused people to stay on the right side of the law, even if they really want to try.
Right. It's almost like it exists to like keep them that way. Right.
Yeah, it is almost that way. A thing that I will mention also, just in case it doesn't come up organically otherwise, is that there are huge costs associated with being arrested. You have to pay a fee for your bail, or if you get bailed by the bail fund, we pay it. But otherwise, you pay a $40 fee just to have them fill out the piece of paper that gets you out. There are also court fees that are assessed. You are assessed a fee unless your attorney is on the ball and makes a request for waiver of fees. You owe usually a $75 victim witness fee and a $150 fee for your public representing. And I often see cases. A thing that I do for other parts of our work is I follow cases where bail is forfeited. And there are many cases. I just dealt with a bunch of these in Worcester County recently, where someone goes through their whole court process, right? Their case is disposed. They show up to court all the time. It happens. And then at the end, they say, okay, you owe us a couple $100. And people don't pay it on time. And then their bail gets forfeited, and usually a warrant gets put out for them. That's a new criminal offense.
Right. And then the warrant can be used as sort of a cudgel to get people to move along when the police don't like where they happen to be at a particular time, right? It's like, oh, I've seen that personally at encampment sweeps, where it's like, you either move along or I'm gonna run your name. And people are like, oh, well, don't run my name, because they know they have open warrants, because how could you not have open warrants in the system, So, I mean, the reason to talk about this now is because all of this was so absent in the way that the Supreme Court was talking about homelessness. And we're talking about like how the Supreme Court might make some sort of change, which all of a sudden makes being homeless a crime. But in cities like Worcester, homeless has been a crime for a long time. Like, it's de facto illegal in a way that I think that you probably see more intimately than most people do, given your line of work. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that general idea that, like Worcester has figured out how to make homelessness a de facto crime.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an accurate and astute statement. And let me also say, Worcester tried to make it even more of a crime to be homeless here than it is. I used to work for a different nonprofit organization, and while I worked there, the city passed a set of very tortured panhandling and pedestrian safety ordinances that they bent over backwards to design in such a way that they would really only specifically be applicable to people who were panhandling on the street asking for money. And they did this after I personally went to city council and kind of gave them a speech that I used to give back at the ACLU from time to time, which is like, nice city you have here. It'd be a shame if it got sued for like violating the Constitution.
Right.
And they didn't listen, and so we sued them. And that case actually technically went all the way to the Supreme Court, where it was remanded back, and basically they were unable to keep that piece that essentially just provided blanket prohibition against people being able to ask for money as a form of free speech, which it is.
Right.
I was at oral arguments in the First Circuit Court when this case was going up the chain, and we had recently retired Supreme Court Justice Kennedy, who was like their like guest spot justice, and it was wild. Like, these people did not understand. Like, I don't know how they're rich and powerful, but even if you're rich and powerful, I don't know how you have that little experience with even just seeing people on the streets. They had no idea about like really basic elements of why would someone want to be here? Why would someone want to walk a median to ask for money? And it's like you've never seen that. But yeah,
because you make money.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think especially in a very stratified place like DC, you probably don't have to see it as often as maybe you do in a place like Worcester. But
right.
But yeah, I mean, the city has been incredibly successful at, I would say, just sort of driving and pushing around everyone, at least criminalizing them to the extent that they can, and using that as a cudgel, as you mentioned. To get them to do what they want, which is always just be somewhere else. Just go be somewhere else. And then wherever you wind up, you're not good there
Eventually.
either. Yeah, you never really have a place to be. You go to they send you to the next place, and then you just wait until there's enough complaints that you get moved from there too.
Right. And that, I mean, what that effectively amounts to, like, I've been reading some academic stuff lately, like this book Banished is really good. And then there's this Chris Herring article on this idea called pervasive penality, is that you figure out how to put together a system of just under like de facto stated laws that keep people basically immiserated and in homelessness, for the sake of, that becomes hard to answer. Like, what is the end goal of this besides just having the right to push somebody from like the city common if you don't want them to be there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you could get a lot of people in power to say the quiet part loud, they want these people to go away. And you can take what that means however you want to, but I think they would be open to almost everything as far as how these people go away. They really don't want them here, is the thing. And yeah, they're willing to do whatever they can. And these, moving the encampments around and stuff, it's not just a response to complaints, although it is that. And that makes me very upset on behalf of my community. But it is also a tactic. Moving people around all the time means you can steal their belongings all the time. It means they can't get settled anywhere. It means they can't settle into really any kind of cohesive community and start to build together, and God forbid, maybe even organize together. It takes all of that away. They just keep precarity at the maximum that it can be, and all you can do at that point is survive. And I'm amazed by how people survive.
Right.
Yeah.
As a galaxy-brained conspiracy theorist, Bill, I am strongly of the opinion that after a decade or so of multiple states going through some degree of prison reform, thanks to people like Chris and the work that they do, even though it's not perfect, there has been a lot of reform. I'm partly convinced that you have the prison industry, especially the privatized prison industry, really eager to see homelessness criminalized because there's already a place to put them. In the sense that like prison beds are now, there's more vacancy in prisons than there has been historically in the last couple decades, while there is a complete lack of vacancy in actual housing. And again, a total conspiracy theory, but I'm convinced that that's actually
between that conspiracy theory and my conspiracy theory about the draft, I think we're starting to get some.
Well, I have a conspiracy theory too.
All right, Brian's got one too. Let's hear it.
Well, we talk about the reasons for homelessness. We talk about what people's like intended solutions to homelessness are. I feel that in my heart that the level of unhoused folks that we have these days is because it's a sweet spot between capitalism, neglect of anything but profit. That this is as far as they can push it before we get to a national crisis level where capital has to come in and help the problem. So this is the maximum amount of profit that you can make and a maximum amount of human suffering you can cause without doing anything about it. So that it's technically a manufactured crisis in that it's choices that a small group of people are making. But it is unconscious in the way of they don't care about, the only part that they care about is not doing anything about it. So that's why that's the managed level of it is.
I like that. I think we'll see that come to bear if the vacant Amazon warehouse at the Greendale Mall becomes a homeless internment camp.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say too, I mean, you don't have to really involve yourself too much in conspiracy theory to see this stuff evidenced in the tactics and ways that the jailers themselves talk. We just did a big presentation a couple weeks ago out in Boston on carceral expansion and how to stop it, and a lot of it was framed around what has gone on down at Massencast, which is like has been for a long time Boston's kind of ongoing and growing encampment space. And what is happening there is there a number of things, including them trying to transfer to this regional lockup model and some other things. But the jailers are saying in their own words, like we have their quotes, them and their associations, they understand that this is a hugely profitable opportunity. They want to move people who need drug treatment and housing into jails. They like we know that they do. They're saying it.
Right. That's
Galaxy brain at work, folks.
well, I mean, going back to like the abolitionist sort of framework of the organization. If you take just a generally like anarchistic view of bureaucracy, what does a bureaucracy do besides, try to enlarge and sustain itself? And what is the bureaucracy of the criminal justice system without criminals, right? So you have to manufacture criminals to sustain the size of the bureaucracy. And that makes a lot of sense in that context to think about what the Worcester Police Department's policy of just pushing people around and making sure they stay as desperate as possible, so long as they have the right to push them around again in the future, right? And that's the same thing as the prison, private prisons or even public prisons. It's all tied into the same sort of bureaucracy. I mean, the police, the courts, the prisons.
People, I just want to make a quick point that I appreciate you bringing up that distinction, because it is a distinction without a difference. It's private prisons are paying shareholders, and that's marginally grosser. But in Massachusetts, we don't have private prisons. We have public prisons. We have private entities that like attach onto them like barnacles to also extract money. But we don't have to have a private prison system for it to be a huge generator of revenue and jobs. It is. Go see how many people work at the courthouse. Like, go see how many people work at the jail.
That's a chill job too.
And, I mean, I wouldn't want to do it, but there's really other reasons why. But yeah, no, I mean, thousands and thousands of people are employed in the Commonwealth in this misery factory that is the cops, courts, and jails. It pays for a lot of people's salaries.
And even in the public sector, I mean, those represent some pretty powerful lobbies as well. And they very much do influence both the budgetary process and the legal process when it comes to, God forbid, changing any laws that might be putting unnecessary populations in prison.
Right. And then you get really dark when you start thinking about how that bureaucracy and like the judiciary and like the DOJ, there's like a revolving door of like people who work in one and go and work in the other. And that now we're getting into, octopus murders style stuff. But no, I mean, like it really, I think that it's been sort of deflating for me just working on this piece about the Supreme Court decision to hear how stupid the Supreme Court was. The Supreme Court justices were talking about homelessness like they have never like been made to think about it once in their life before. And the fact that this narrative has emerged that homelessness like is not already illegal, like that it's going to be made illegal by the Supreme Court. But it's like in Worcester, it's been illegal for so long. And Worcester's not like a remarkable city. It's pretty run of the mill in terms of how we respond to our homelessness problem. Oh, wait, I was going to ask you this. This is a practical question about bail accounting from Melican. I'm very curious about bail accounting. Who is bail paid to it and what business holds it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so the way that bail works is that it is paid to a bail clerk who is almost always an employee of the state. They're actually an employee of the courts, the court in the district that the bail is being paid in. So, for example, When I go to bail people at the Worcester House of Corrections, I actually don't deal with the bail clerks from Worcester. I deal with bail clerks from Clinton, because that is the court that covers West Boylston, where the jail is. But the way that it works is you go in, you bring your money. Usually it's cash. At the jails, it's pretty much always cash. And so you go in and you pay it to this bail clerk, and you give them two amounts of money. You give them the bail, and that goes in a little bag that they have. And then you give them $40, and that goes in a different little bag that they have. And that is a fee that goes directly to that person. It is their money. So
what?
Yeah.
I need my cut.
The VIG.
It is. It's the VIG. And I mean, let me tell you, these are high level patronage positions. They're very good jobs. They pay very well. They're state jobs, so the benefits are incredible. You can have the job your entire fucking life. And then in addition to that, for every one of these bail slips they fill out, it's literally a one sheet green piece of paper. Here, I'll show you one from far enough away that you can't see the stuff on it. They fill this out. That's the whole job they do. And then they charge you $40 for it per person.
So they're getting paid by the state, but they've somehow convinced that that you have to pay for it as well, right?
Yes, you have to pay them directly also for the privilege. And that money never comes back. It goes right in their pocket. And so then bail money eventually sort of wends its way to the court itself. It winds up in their custody eventually. There used to be some really crazy stuff with like bail commissioners like maintaining their own bank accounts of that money for like months. That was actually how it was done. I've heard an anecdotal story or two about like kids of bail commissioners, like, you know, going on a nice family vacation, and then like it just got eventually paid back to that fund that was people's bail money. Anyway, you didn't hear it from me. But then it goes to the court. And the cool thing about bail, well, there's not much cool about bail, but the cool thing for us is that bail is a renewable resource the vast majority of the time. It's how we're able to do what we do. And so what that means is if I pay $1,000 bail for you, Bill, and you go through and you do your court stuff, and you show up and you take care of your case, once your case is taken care of, then the money can come back to you. And so in this case, the bail fund would be the surety, or the person who's on paper as owning the money. That is also its own sort of crazy arcane process, just getting it back. Like,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So wait, hold on. So like the bail money can come back to you after you, like, the judge does a null prosecuti or whatever it is, or just like clears the case out.
Yeah, or even if you're found guilty, even if you take a plea,
adjudicated.
Yeah. So what's important for, I guess, me to say here is, in theory, bail exists to ensure that you return to court. It is a monetary incentive for you to show up to court and deal with your court stuff. That's not actually how it's used, but that is what it's supposed to be. And so for that reason, once you've shown up and done your court stuff, you get your money back.
I actually don't. I have no idea if my aunts who paid my bail ever actually got the money back.
Chris, does it collect interest?
It does not. Well, I'm sure it collects interest. It doesn't collect interest for you.
For you. Sorry, Brian. Just trying to help.
No, yeah. Listen. No,
yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing about that too. As we've evidenced here, not everyone knows that. The court will theoretically send you a letter, except sometimes they don't. And if they do, they send it to the address that you gave when you filled out your paperwork, which might not be where you live anymore. Then it's not like you can just call them up and be like, cool, cut me that check. You've got to go to the court, which may be counties away, during court business hours, and sit there for potentially hours while you wait for them to cut you a check. Like, the court does not do anything fast. So that could be, they could owe you money, and you could need to drive, an hour plus away and sit around all day to get it. So
actually, that raises a question. You're talking about the process of bail. Mine was paid at the court when the judge said it. Is that a different process than what you're talking about going to the jail and doing it?
So I can explain that quickly. There's a few different points at which you can pay bail. So if I got arrested right now, they came in and took me and arrested me, I would be brought to the police station down the road, and they would process and book me. And at some point, probably a few hours later, a bail clerk would show up. One of these same people that I was talking about, they would show up. They're able to, they are empowered to do kind of a crazy amount of things. But one of those things that they can do is they can take a look at basically your police report, your past criminal record, etc. And they can make a determination right then and there on a bail amount for you. And if you can pay that amount right then and there, then you leave from the police station. If that doesn't happen, what sounds like maybe happened in your case, when you get brought to court the next business day, the judge would set a bail for you. And then you also have the opportunity to pay that at the court. And if you paid at the court, there is actually no fee charged. We won't get into that, but they figured that's like their normal job. If they have to get in their car, then they get extra money.
That's nice of them.
Yeah.
You go to City Hall to pay your taxes. Yeah.
Right. Then the third thing that can happen is that you couldn't pay your bail when you got arrested. You couldn't pay your bail when you got arraigned. Now you get brought to the jail. And now you're just sitting there until someone could pay your bail. And so because of the amount of time it takes for the bail fund to get a referral from an attorney, get good information, schedule a bail posting, 99 times out of 100, that's when we're paying bail. We're paying bail after someone already missed the chance to pay it at the first time and the second time, which also means we're often dealing with people. And I really want to underscore this. When I say like we're dealing with people who cannot pay these amounts of money that judges impose on them, some people are sitting for weeks, months, several months, a year more before their bail can get paid. They really don't have that money. And so we deal with people who are in a situation where in their entire network, somebody can't come up with, $500 or $200 or even $100 sometimes to come and get them free. I've paid bails that were $50. I've paid $25 bails. The bail fund has paid $1 bails.
That and somebody could be sitting for a year in jail on years in jail on what is bail usually set for like a trespassing charge?
Depends on your record, but there's never like this stuff is so arbitrary. But I mean, I would say you could figure that's going to be 100 to a couple hundred to several hundred. It's probably going to be in the range of what the bail fund can pay, which is up to 1,000 if you don't have underlying charges. But yeah, and so here's the other flip side of that. You're sitting in and you're waiting for someone to pay your bail. You're stuck and you're waiting while you go through the court process, gets dragged out. The court doesn't want you to go to trial. If everyone went to trial, or even most people went to trial, the court would fall apart. The court and the DAs are heavily incentivized to get you to take a deal before that. And here's a great one with trespassing. Trespassing on a first offense is 30 days in jail maximum. And I don't remember what the fine amount is, but it's not a ton. So you've been sitting there for 3 months, and they come to you and they say, hey, would you like to get out today for time served? But you can do that if you take a guilty plea. And if you're stuck in jail because no one can pay your bail, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to wait around a few more months and try to prove your case? Like, no, you're going to take it. Like, you're going to take the deal. Now you have another charge. Now you have another conviction. Now you have more what they call committed time. By the way, these are all factors in how your next bail is going to be decided.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can kind of see that that manufacturing of criminal conspiracy theory come to life in that sort of like invisible, insidious process that like does not ever get reported on, or like very few people even know besides the people that it happens to. Like you're probably one of the people, one of a very few people in the state who would be like intimately aware of that process and not in on the game, right? Like like the guy taking $40 from people for their personal recognizance fee is in on the game. He gets how it works, and he likes it. But like you are in a position where you can see that sort of up close and not have a vested interest in it. And I think that that's a very interesting perspective to see this kind of stuff from, because like it's just like like just saying it out loud, like somebody has been in jail for a $50 bail for a year is like just the most nightmarish, like cruel, like how could you believe anything about America? You hear something like that, right?
Yeah, and I always like to say, you know, like I always like to, as an organizer, I always like to think about how would I explain this to a sociopath who like doesn't care about anybody with a, you know, as a person. Here's how I explain it as a sociopath. How much money does that cost you? Because that person couldn't pay $50. Like,
yeah,
you've locked them up for a year. You could have sent them to like a nice college for that money.
Yeah.
Right.
And you threw it away because this person didn't have $50. That's not the reason I oppose it, but like it's another reason.
It's a reason to oppose it. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's like the Wayne Griffins of the world, you know, might be sympathetic to that argument. Like it's documented that like each unhoused person costs cities like something like $100,000 a year or something like that. Obviously that number is all over the place. It's really hard to put like a specific price point on it, but like that's real. And like just building a freaking apartment
no
cost that much.
What we're gonna do is we're gonna buy Busta Rhymes Island, and they're all gonna have to live there.
But
don't
wow,
give them that idea, Brian.
Donna Caloria is gonna have an article come across her desk about it.
The Busta Rhymes autonomous zone. Oh man. You have any other questions in the chat? Any questions for Chris?
Jack had a specific question earlier. I don't even know if he's still here. And I don't care, but
While you're looking for Jack's question, Chris, just out of curiosity, have you seen any increase in folks requiring or requesting your support as we've seen rates of the unhoused grow, or have you just seen in general rates of incarceration increase as rates of the unhoused have grown?
Well, I think what I can say is this. So I've been, you know, like I said, I've been around the bail fund a long time, but I've been very intimately involved and as staff for about 4 years now. And I can say when I started as staff, we were really deep in the throes of COVID. And so there was actually, for a moment, between that and the uprisings that were happening in 2020 over the murder of George Floyd and many others, there was a little bit of an appetite to at least appear to be decarcerating. And so what we saw on the ground was less people getting bails, more people getting cut back out to the street, maybe cut back out to the street on home confinement, so prison that you wear on your ankle, but still better than prison. Not what we want, but better than prison. And then what I have really seen is, you know, locally, and we're seeing it really across all of our counties, is that moment seems to be over, and arrests and bails are ticking back up. We're having our busiest months over these last few months. We've never bailed as many people as we're bailing now, and it's the same bullshit charges, and it's the same little bail amounts, and everything's the same. That appetite seems to be long gone.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious, again, if you're seeing more that appeared that the unhoused were being criminalized, or that you saw people even seeking shelter. Do you take an even more grim approach that, the House of Corrections was starting to fill up with people who...
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say anecdotally, I definitely have noticed more quality of life type charges, trespasses, disorderly conducts, the loitering stuff that I was mentioning, where, people congregating in places that they don't want them to congregate. I have definitely noticed that there seemed to be more of an emphasis on that locally over the last, I would say, year or two. I think anyone who is around Worcester, and in particular downtown, which for folks who don't know, that's where I live like directly downtown. And you can see what's happening around you. There's more people down here. There are more unhoused people. There are more people, in the streets that don't have a place besides the streets to go. And I think even just a proportionate response is going to make the numbers go up. But I think it's been more than that. I think they really are trying to more aggressively police this stuff. Encampments used to last a lot longer. I've never lived in one, but I've talked to many people that have. Used to be a lot easier to, keep an encampment DL for a while. People weren't freaking out about it. I mean, yeah.
I want to ask you, because this has come up in my reporting, is the involvement of business improvement districts in the policing of unhoused, which is specific actually to Worcester, because, and like, not to like say your address or anything, like where actually you live, there is a bid. And the bid has community ambassadors. And the Business Development Corporation or whatever that put this bid together was didn't say a lot about the security function of those community ambassadors, but I'm wondering if anecdotally you've seen that they if they serve that role with the unhoused.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought this up because bids are one of the front lines where this battle is going to happen. Because another thing that is, happening more generally as a response to homelessness and around, opioid use and what is considered like antisocial public behavior is that a lot of the new workforce for that is being privatized. It's being done by, security guards who are making, minimum wage. As far as being down here, so yeah, I do. I live like directly in the middle of the bid, and I have noticed, ambassadors and stuff move people along, kind of gently try to do that. They don't seem. I mean, honestly, they don't seem that interested in doing even just like the basic job that they do. Like I see them on, posted up with their garbage can, like around a corner on their phone, which I mean, I don't really care, but
yeah, that's fine.
Mostly
you're taking
what I've seen,
crock money. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah.
Mostly what I've seen down here with the bid is just like the level of service that we are provided in this neighborhood is outrageous. I mean, our streets are cleaned, our sidewalks are cleaned basically every day. Our streets are swept every day. Those sorts of things, that services that other people in the vast majority of the city don't get. What I have seen a little bit more as far as like the policing aspect is like security from the bus station and, some of those people, being a little more active with moving people along or calling the police and participating in that criminalization.
Right. I mean, like that's in the article I'm reading about San Francisco, which is from 2019. Like the core function of the community ambassadors of San Francisco's bid was basically just to threaten to call the cops if people don't move along. It's like, hey, if you don't get out of here right now, I'm going to call the cops on you. And they don't often have to actually call the cops to get people to move because they're like, yeah, whatever, fine.
And I mean, I really think, that's coming here. Just because I haven't seen it yet doesn't mean it's not coming. I very much believe it is. And I think all you have to do is look to places like San Francisco or even look to Boston. The area down at Massancast is also a bid, and they've used it to hire mass. Yeah, it is. It is.
Wait, did they make the bid around Massancast?
They sure did.
Yo, that's fucked, dude. That's crazy. Are you? Oh wow, I gotta read up on that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I can send you some stuff, but yeah, that is, if you want to see our future, that's where you can see it, right? Because that is heavily policed by actual police. I always laugh when people talk about, like the concept of like, oh, more police, makes you safer, makes you feel safer. I've never been to a more policed place in my life than Atkinson Street in Boston, where in the middle of that encampment, you will never not see police. And there are private security everywhere around every structure. Like, don't even get near their thing. Don't lie down on the sidewalk near it. Like,
yeah. That's interesting because like the downtown Worcester bid and the bid ostensibly in San Francisco had like sort of the stated purpose of beautification and sanitation of public spaces. It's about it's about making an area cleaner and nicer. And all of the ways that unhoused people are treated is baked into that pie. But like the stated goal, at least, is that it is a business district for businesses to improve themselves. This bid for Massancast seems like it was a bid created expressly for the security part, because that's not like a nice neighborhood. That's not a nice part of town.
Right. There's no like.
I think Chris is having some troubles.
Some audio issues.
Yeah.
Are
you muted?
There you go.
I'm back. Sorry, I just switched phones because they died.
Oh, okay, no problem. I was asking about the creation of the bid around Massancast seems to have, or I don't understand how it would have any premise other than security. Like it's not like the prized jewel of the city, that area. It's not like they're like the stated goal could be sanitate, like I don't know. I'm not asking the question right. When was the bid created?
I'd have to look. I don't know the I don't know the origin details, and I don't know what the bid says. I only have had a lot of experience seeing what it does. But yeah, I mean, my understanding is that it is still kind of their argument that like, oh, we want to revitalize this area. Which is kind of wild because before there was ever an unhoused person living down there, it's an area where like, trucks drive out like food deliveries and stuff.
Right.
It's not near anything. It's not a desirable place to be.
It'd be like if if Worcester made a bid district around like Grafton Square, right?
Yeah.
It's like that's not somewhere where a bid usually goes. And that's why I found it so interesting, because it seems like that is like a step in escalating direction of using that sort of business improvement district policy strategy that has always been sort of punitive in a more expressly punitive way, as a way to like just expressly hire private security, as opposed to like saying that they're going to be going around and making up the trash, making sure the trash is picked up. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for the municipality, I think it is also a way to strike one of their very favorite deals, which is a public-private partnership.
We love them.
They love those because we don't have enough revenue. And if you tell people you're going to raise their taxes to do a lot of this stuff, they don't want to do it. But if we can transfer some of the fiscal responsibility onto, let's say, the building like mine or others around here that have gotten huge tax breaks to build, but they can pay a little fee so that the sidewalks get swept up, then that's what they would call a win-win.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Any more questions for Chris? I think that
I did see the question that got popped up. Cool. If whoever asked it is still here, hit me up on email.
I've been starring now. Let me see if I have any.
Yeah, it's right. It's Jack Murray asked it.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah.
oh, yeah.
Jack asking about how to refer someone. So typically we take referrals through attorneys, but we'll take referrals from anyone. And we're happy to do that. So the easiest way to do it is going to be to email me at Chris, CHRIS, at massbailfund.org. And I'd be happy to look at that for you and see if we can get that person free.
Great. Well, Chris, thank you for coming on.
Chris, thank you very much.
This was really interesting, and I feel like I want to hit you up about a couple of certain little threads that were teased out in some of the bail fund work that I could follow up on in a reporting sense. But yeah, it was. I think this was a great and way more nuanced conversation about homelessness and the way that the government responds to homelessness than we've been getting this week in general, in light of the Supreme Court. And I think it's important to sort of understand the ways that the criminal justice system sort of produces this reality for people. And that's a special insight that you have. So thanks so much, Chris.
Yeah, thank you guys sincerely for having me, and not just for having me, although I am the smartest person, obviously. Coming after Etel, I can't say that actually. But yeah, also just having this conversation. It's a really important way to have the conversation, and it's not really being replicated anywhere else. So I'm glad it's happening.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Very much. Take care, brother.
All right. What now?
I mean, I think, that was a pretty heavy conversation overall. It might be a good spot to leave it for the night.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. Whoa. No, we were going to have a seance.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, shit. All right, hold on. Let me go check I'll go get her out of the cage. Okay, 1 second.
All right, I guess we're going to try.
Sorry, I don't mean to.
Fuck. She's gone.
Oh, no.
Dang it.
Wait.
Abraxas is on the lam. We need to put out a bolo for Abraxas, everyone.
An Ebolo for Abraxas.
An Ebolo for Abraxas. But yeah, this is a good show. I'm happy that we got those two interviews specifically today, because those are, to my mind, the two people in the city who could do the best job of talking about the homelessness problem.
That was fantastic.
Was that?
You guys see Roman sleeping?
Oh, look at that little boy.
Hold on, we're gonna zoom in.
Yeah.
Look at that guy.
Oh, thank you to everyone who came out to the book club on Thursday and watched it on the stream. I didn't watch the stream at all, or check in on that, but it seemed like there were some good comments happening there, and the audio could have been better when I skimmed through it after.
Been a lot worse, honestly.
But it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
So
I could hear everybody.
We're learning.
So
and I was driving on a highway. So
yeah, and Brendan helped me sort of A/B it, but that was a rig that I conceived with my own stupid brain. So there is a lot of room for improvement.
It went very well though. We'll get it dialed in next time, and
yeah, I thought that was really, really fun. I was really stoked on it. And thank you to everyone who came prepared to really engage with that text in a deep way, because there's a lot to pull from it, and I feel like we were getting onto some deep.
I wasn't kidding. I commented during the stream that there's never been a smarter conversation happening on Twitch ever.
Very true.
Yeah, I like Brendan's message to the group chat. These are some of the smartest commenters union people ever.
The commenters union shock troops, the elite squad. Yeah.
Yeah, it was incredible. I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah. The next one is tentatively going to be May 23rd, I think, but I will be sending out an email this week.
Oh yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm very stoked on it.
Yeah, this was a really good episode. If you missed the beginning, we had Etel on starting from about 5 minutes in, I think. Watch the entire interview. Etel and Chris were both incredible tonight, so make sure you go back and watch that. You can find it right here on our Twitch channel, or you can, go to our Woot Nannies YouTube, but subscribe to our Twitch. Make sure you're subscribed to billshaner.substack.com. Worcester Sucks and I Love It. WorcesterSucks.email at Worcester_sucks for all your updates. Make sure that you are following Woot Nanny Comedy. There we go. At Woot Nanny Comedy. We got a bunch of shows coming up, including this Friday, Hot Dog at Coney Island at 8 p.m. We just had a crazy one down in New Orleans, and so we're coming back with a lot of energy, and we're very excited. We got a great lineup. It's free. Come on down, get some hot dogs, hang out. It is an absolute blast. So make sure that you're joining us for that. Again, subscribe to this Twitch channel. Also, follow us on Instagram at WCT3000. Impeachgate Toomey. There you go. Buy a t-shirt. Buy a t-shirt, wct3k.storeenvy.com. I was wearing my Commenters Union shirt in New Orleans, got some comments on it.
Hell yeah.
So make sure that you get one of those so you can wear it to the next book club meeting, and maybe we'll start getting followed by the FBI if we get smart enough.
Thanks.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. You guys have got anything else to plug before we take off?
No, this was fantastic. Thanks for making it happen.
We got one more week without a city meeting, so we're gonna do some more fun next week probably.
Hell yeah. Call leave voicemails. We have the Google Voice number set up.
Oh yeah,
we can play those.
We gotta leave voicemails.
508-925.
I'll leave a voicemail to get us going.
Yeah, there we go.
Perspective of the coin.
So we'll play those next week. If you have questions, comments, bits you want to do, we can play them. We're still trying to figure out the best way to take live calls. But the Google Voice is not that great, but it's a good voicemail. So leave us those, send us messages, and we'll see you next Tuesday, everybody. Goodbye. We love you. Goodbye.